Welcome, Bill.
Well, thank you very much, Sonia. It's great to be here.
Yeah, we were really excited to schedule this interview because I personally was very intrigued about your article on unstructured data. And for our listeners, could you share with us what was your inspiration, first and foremost, for even writing this article?
Yeah, it was the confluence of really three different kind of threads, I'd say. The first is my co-author and I, Chris Beach. He's a forensic accountant of about 40 years. Excuse me, and I've been in litigation myself, first as a practicing attorney and then from a technical consulting standpoint for a good 25 years. And one of the things we noticed is that when some kind of internal control breakdown or risk emerges into an investigation or a litigation, the first thing that the attorneys and the regulators all reach for is they go to the email. It's in the email or in the other unstructured data, PowerPoints and so on, where they get the story. How did this happen? How did this come about? And of course, later on, then they argue about, well, you should have known it was coming. Well, how could I have known it was coming? All of that's happening out in unstructured data. It doesn't happen in the accounting system, so to speak. Then another thing, this is all kind of that whole area of litigation has been really developing, and one of the reasons is, and this is the second thread, there's just an incredible increase, especially since the internet came alive in 1996, an incredible increase in the volume and the proliferation of the forms of communication that people participate in, all happening at the same time that corporations are becoming less centralized, about the corporate organizations becoming less centralized, less able to kind of assert top-down controls. So all that's happening. And then the third thing, really from the standards and regulator side of things, we notice there's a lot more pressure coming from COSO, for example, to expand beyond internal controls into a larger risk management and risk mitigation policies, procedures, and so on. And we see the same thing, in the legal market, coming from regulators, statutes. I was just at a conference where they were talking about the FCPA, the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, and how corporations used to have sort of an excuse. Well, yeah, we did our due diligence. We just didn't know that this employee of ours was bribing a Chinese official. What's happening is the government is getting less and less forgiving of that sort of thing and saying, look, we don't care what your excuse is. We're going to hold you liable, and in some cases criminally liable, for not having caught that type of problem. And those are the sorts of problems we see out in email, for example. So those sorts of things made us really focus on the fact that there's a lot of risk happening at a greater pace within corporate organizations, and kind of the standard models of internal controls don't catch it, or don't catch it fast enough, or catch it after the fact, rather than how do we catch it on the front end while it's still emerging. And so we wrote that article really to talk about mining and monitoring email, social media, and so on, in order to identify emerging risks before they turn into a controls problem or litigation.
Yeah, it's kind of like companies don't know what they don't know, but the problem is with this unknown element, there's a lack of a risk-based approach to that monitoring of unstructured data. That part struck me the most because, like you stated earlier, I mean, the technology. First off, the communication style. For example, Twitter, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
140 characters. So
right.
There's data out there. Okay, so some of it's going to be keyword issues, and like you said, emails. It's not just only the content of the email, but who's it going to, and then timing of it, what attachments, like you were mentioning, PowerPoint. So companies are making a very broad assumption that everybody's doing the right thing, right? There's that the due diligence process is, well, I got a sub-certification from that subsidiary I have in Hong Kong that's responsible for doing all the financial reporting for all my Asia, right, entities, and they just submit a document saying everything, all the controls are fine, and therefore I'm good to go. But like you stated earlier, regulators are starting to put the pressure on, saying your due diligence really wasn't good enough. This bribery issue, et cetera, it could have been caught. It's your responsibility to have a more sophisticated monitoring process for these items, and boom, here comes the penalty. And I think that's what's causing people, it's catching them by surprise, because before, it wasn't, let's say, a major trend, but now, like you were mentioning, the for the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, it's becoming a bigger and bigger issue, which kind of leads me into, go ahead.
No, and that's exactly right, and it's one of the issues is just the speed at which something a risk can emerge into a problem and go viral is just so even compared to 10 years ago when we had corporate email and there was some internet email going on, but now things can really blow up. Serious problems for corporations can really blow up in a matter of 24-hour period, and so all of the post facto reporting or investigations or whatever are often too late, and in some sense, I mean, this is really one of the things that we toyed with the Journal of Accountancy editors, was kind of what angle to take on this, and as we were finishing up this article, actually, the whole issue with the NSA obviously monitoring telephone metadata and emails and so on kind of blew up, and we thought, well, maybe we could take that angle, and we thought that's a rather negative angle. But it points out the fact that the government has this same sort of problem with regards to terrorist organizations worldwide, is how do you mine the information out there in order to get advance warning of problems rather than waiting until, the Twin Towers blow up and then saying afterwards, well, who did this, and going to Afghanistan. So it's really the same sort of problem, but corporations have, their own serious problems, and how do you deal with it? One of the things that we noticed in the literature, and then I'll be done, one of the things we noticed in the literature around risk management and internal controls was everybody was noting the problem. COSO was, and some of the bigger players in the industry, and they would get to the point where the question is, well, what do I do about this? And then you'd sort of get, and I'm going to say somewhat weak answers, what I'd call people process answers. We need to form a committee focusing on risk, train people. These are all good things, but the people process answers need to be supplemented, we thought, with going right at the data, which you can do in volume, you can do it with machines, and the technology, of course, is there today, which it wasn't 10 years ago, to really sift through things and look for serious problems.